In September of 2019, a man rang the opening bell at the Nasdaq. Smiling for the cameras, his company freshly listed on the stock market. 14 months later, that company was worth $50 billion. He personally was worth over $1 billion. Today he says he has lost almost all of it. This isn't a story about a fad that faded. It's a story about a bet that made perfect sense, right up until the exact moment it didn't. This is the story of Peloton, the exercise bike that briefly became one of the most valuable consumer brands in America, and the founder whose own bank started calling in the very shares that had made him rich. 400 investors said no before anyone said yes. John Foley, a former Barnes & Noble and IAC executive, co-founded Peloton in January of 2012, with an idea that sounds obvious now and sounded ridiculous then. Take the energy of a packed boutique spin class, the kind of thing SoulCycle and Flywheel were charging premium prices for in a handful of cities, and pipe it directly into people's living rooms through a screen bolted onto a stationary bike. It's easy, in hindsight, to laugh at 400 rejections. It's much harder to remember that every single one of those investors was, at the time, making a perfectly defensible decision with the information available to them. Every investor who turned Foley down was making a reasonable bet. Nobody had proven that people would pay thousands of dollars for a piece of gym equipment plus a monthly subscription just to work out at home. In June of 2013, Foley took the idea to Kickstarter instead and raised $307,332 from ordinary people willing to bet on something Wall Street wouldn't touch yet. It was enough to build a real prototype. The Kickstarter backers weren't just customers. They were, in a sense, the company's first true believers, betting on a product that existed mostly as a sketch and a promise at the time they handed over their money. In January of 2014, the first Peloton bike shipped, a 22-inch touchscreen bolted to the handlebars, with live and on-demand classes streaming straight into it. Growth was real but slow at first, the kind of slow that tests a founder's patience for years. By 2016, the company had sold roughly 50,000 bikes, a respectable number, not yet a phenomenon. The name itself, Peloton, is borrowed from competitive cycling, the term for the main pack of riders moving together through a race, chosen deliberately to evoke community rather than isolation, the exact opposite of what a lone exercise bike in a spare bedroom usually feels like. Peloton finally went public on the Nasdaq on September 26, 2019, pricing its shares at $29 and raising more than $1.15 billion, notable mostly because the company still hadn't turned an annual profit. Peloton's own initial public offering filings openly acknowledged the company had never posted a profitable year, a detail some analysts flagged as a genuine risk rather than a footnote, arguing that a company still burning cash didn't necessarily belong on public markets yet, regardless of how devoted its early customers seemed. A promising but unprofitable fitness startup, finally public, still searching for the scale that would make the math work. Then, in the spring of 2020, every gym in America closed at once. Peloton had spent 7 years trying to convince people that working out at home could replace a gym membership. In the space of a few weeks, a global pandemic made that argument for them, forcibly, all at once, whether people wanted to hear it or not. Demand exploded so far beyond anything the company had projected that growth Peloton executives had expected to see over 5 to 7 years arrived in a matter of months. By December of 2020, Peloton's stock hit an intraday peak of $167 a share. The company's total valuation reached nearly $50 billion. John Foley's personal stake crossed $1 billion in value. A man who had been told no 400 times was, on paper at least, a billionaire. Peloton became, almost overnight, a genuine cultural touchstone, referenced in late-night monologues, parodied on television, its leaderboard usernames turning into a strange new form of social status among people who had never met each other in person. Here's where the story starts to turn, and it turns on a decision that looked completely rational at the time. Peloton's leadership had a choice to make about the surge in demand. Was this temporary, a pandemic spike that would fade once gyms reopened? Or was this the new baseline, evidence that the entire fitness industry had permanently shifted toward the home? The company bet the surge was permanent and built an entire new factory in Ohio, an enormous manufacturing hub, for demand that was already, quietly, about to disappear. During virtual company meetings at the time, Foley reportedly told staff the growth was so explosive it felt almost impossible to plan for. He was right about the impossible part. He was wrong about which direction the impossibility would eventually run. Executives weren't being reckless in any obvious way either. Every data point in front of them, in the middle of 2020, pointed the same direction, upward. And the honest, uncomfortable truth is that no forecasting model available at the time could reliably tell the difference between a permanent shift in consumer behavior and a temporary emergency response to a locked-down world. It gets worse before it gets slow. In April of 2021, a child died, and dozens of other injuries were reported involving Peloton's treadmill, forcing a major safety recall that arrived at the exact worst possible moment for the company's reputation. Just as vaccines were rolling out and gyms were reopening across the country, just as the entire premise of pandemic-driven demand was already starting to reverse, Peloton was simultaneously managing a genuine safety crisis involving its own hardware. Consumer trust, already about to be tested by changing habits, took a direct hit from a story that had nothing to do with subscriptions or stock prices at all. Peloton initially resisted regulators' recommendation to recall the treadmill entirely, a decision that drew sharp public criticism before the company reversed course and pulled the product from sale, a sequence that made the eventual recall feel, to many observers, like it had arrived a step later than it should have. By the second half of 2021, demand collapsed almost as sharply as it had once exploded. The Ohio factory built for permanent growth was now manufacturing bikes nobody was rushing to buy, warehouses filled with unsold inventory. In February of 2022, Foley stepped down as CEO amid the mounting crisis, and Peloton cut nearly 3,000 jobs in a single announcement, roughly 20% of its corporate workforce. Barry McCarthy, a former Netflix and Spotify finance executive, took over trying to steady the company. McCarthy inherited a company burning cash at an alarming rate, and one of his first public priorities was simply proving Peloton could survive long enough to find a sustainable size, rather than continuing to operate as though the pandemic-era growth curve would ever return. What happened to Foley personally is where this stops being just a corporate story and becomes something more uncomfortable to watch. As Peloton's stock price collapsed, Foley faced repeated margin calls from Goldman Sachs on personal loans he had taken out against his own Peloton shares, pledged as collateral back when they were worth a fortune. Shares once worth more than $300 million were, within about a year, worth roughly $30 million. In a 2024 interview, Foley told the New York Post plainly that he had lost almost all of his money, that he had had to sell his $55 million oceanfront estate in East Hampton, and that he was, in his own words, hungry and humble, trying to rebuild something close to a fortune from close to nothing. The company itself did not stabilize quickly either. McCarthy resigned in May of 2024, after roughly 2 years in the role, alongside yet another round of layoffs, about 15% of the remaining staff, close to 400 people. Peter Stern, a former Apple and Ford executive, became Peloton's third CEO in 4 years, starting in January of 2025. 3 chief executives, each one inheriting a smaller, more diminished version of the company than the person before them had received. Each leadership change came with its own restructuring plan, its own promised path back to profitability, and each time, the underlying math proved more stubborn than the plan accounted for. Here's an honest way to hold this story, the same way you might hold any bet that looks brilliant right up until it doesn't. One reading says, Peloton's leadership made a reckless, hubristic error, mistaking a once-in-a-century pandemic spike for permanent structural change, and paid for that mistake with billions of dollars in overbuilt manufacturing capacity. The other reading says, almost any company, looking at those exact same growth numbers in real time in 2020, with no way to know how long lockdowns would last, would have made a remarkably similar bet. The truth probably holds both readings at once. It was a reasonable decision built on unreasonable circumstances, and the unreasonable circumstances simply didn't last. Very few founders, in the middle of the single strangest demand spike any consumer hardware company has experienced in recent memory, would have chosen restraint over expansion. Hindsight makes the correct choice look obvious, It rarely felt obvious at the time. By 2025 and 2026, Peloton's peak $50 billion valuation had shrunk to somewhere around $1.8 billion, a decline of more than 95%. More layoffs followed even into this period, 6% in August of 2025, 11% in January of 2026, hollowing out engineering teams the company said it needed to build its future. In October of 2025, under Stern, Peloton unveiled what it called the biggest reinvention in its history, an entirely refreshed hardware lineup with rotating touchscreens and AI-powered coaching cameras at higher prices across the board. Every screen now rotates a full 360 degrees, letting the same machine double as a platform for strength training and yoga, not just cycling, an attempt to widen the product's appeal beyond the original spin class crowd that first made the brand famous. It's worth noting what Peloton has not done through all of this. Unlike most companies in this catalog, it has never filed for bankruptcy. It remains an independent public company, still fighting, still betting on one more comeback. That distinction matters more than it might seem. A bankruptcy filing draws a clean legal line under a company's old story and lets a new one begin. Peloton has never had that luxury. Every restructuring, every layoff, every reinvention has had to happen in full public view, on a stock ticker anyone can watch in real time, with no courtroom to quietly absorb the mess in between chapters. By fiscal year 2025, roughly 6 million people were still counted as Peloton members, with close to 2.8 million of them paying subscribers every month. Somewhere right now, in a spare bedroom or a converted garage, someone is clipping into a Peloton bike at 6 in the morning, completely unaware of margin calls or CEO transitions, or a factory in Ohio built for a boom that ended almost as soon as it began. That's the strange, genuinely human part of this story that the stock chart alone doesn't capture. The community Foley set out to build in 2012, the actual people showing up to ride, is still there, still riding, largely unaware of or indifferent to what happened to the billion-dollar valuation that once sat on top of it. Whatever happens to the company's stock price or its next CEO, that particular part of what Foley built, the ride, the leaderboard, the sense of showing up alongside strangers, appears to have genuinely outlasted the hype that first made it famous. Peloton never went bankrupt. It just lost roughly 95% of what it was ever worth on paper, watched its own founder lose his personal fortune right alongside it, and is still, right now, betting everything on one more reinvention. If you ever had a Peloton in your living room, if you rode it every day for 6 months and then let it become a very expensive coat rack, or if you're still riding it right now, drop a comment below. Tell us the year you got it and whether you're still on the leaderboard. The people who actually clipped in know more about what this company built than any stock chart ever will.